Welcome to Making Stuff, the podcast about people who make something out of nothing. I'm your host, Eliza Tebow, a musician and journalist who spent years producing creative projects from scratch and paying attention to how things actually get built. On today's episode, we're sitting down with leadership coach and author Maria Brinck. Maria is the founder of Zynergy International, a leadership advisory firm established in 2013. Based in Colorado, she works with boards, CEOs, and executive teams globally. She's also a Gallup certified strengths coach and has held roles at GE, Eli Lilly & Co., and Novo Nordisk. Her clients include Quanix, AstraZeneca, and Beacon. Maria grew up in Sweden and Algeria and studied international business in both the US and Europe. Her most transformative experience, however, came when she lived and worked with indigenous people in the Congo Basin rainforest in Cameroon. While working on the rehabilitation of chimpanzees and gorillas, she observed firsthand human planetary destruction and its consequences for all living things. But she also witnessed the type of leadership needed to bring out the best in humanity. Last year, she released her first book, The Leadership We Need, A New Mindset for a Brighter Future. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you so much, Eliza. Appreciate it being here.
So give us a little bit of a day in the life of your work as a leadership coach and author.
Yeah, well, currently I'm doing a lot of this, so podcasts, and such an honor. It's so fun to speak to people like yourself, getting the message out and hopefully having impact. Because obviously one of the reasons I wrote this book is because I felt there was something missing in this world. And I wanted to change that and have impact. So that was not my life, let's say, a year ago before the book came out, where I was mostly working with teams, being a team coach, executive coach, a leadership consultant and trainer, working a lot with bringing out the best in people, increasing people's potential, bringing out the uniqueness of a team and the uniqueness of the individuals on the team, their strengths, getting into their core values, and creating purpose for teams and individuals. So things have shifted a little bit. I'm also doing a lot of public speaking and writing articles. So, but it's all a lot of fun. And as you know, it's fun to be in the creative space and having a
Absolutely.
voice. Yeah.
For sure. So I'm very curious to learn more about your work in Cameroon and how that shaped your perspective on leadership, because it sounds like it made a big difference.
It did make a big difference. Coming over to the United States as an international student back in 1995, I obviously drawn to the American dream, and turned out it wasn't the dream that I had foreseen. And maybe it's the same sentiment a lot of people feeling right now, where it's overshadowed with titles and money and status, and maybe for some it doesn't have quite the meaning that we were hoping for. And that is what I felt in corporate America at the time, working at these companies, as you mentioned. And I decided that I wanted something more in life, and I couldn't just exist for the numbers. I was at the time in sales positions. And that's when I decided to quit my job and move to Cameroon. At the time, I didn't know for how long, but it ended up being an amazing transition and transformational experience in my life that I do bring into my book, The Leadership We Need, because the big surprise there, I wasn't in leadership per se at the time. I was not a consultant. All this happened after. But what I witnessed there was just so different as far as the leadership style versus what I've seen in corporate America. But it wasn't the reason for my trip. I was actually going to work with animals. I was going to work with chimpanzees and gorillas and the amazing great apes. And that was really the passion of my trip. But the Cameroon trip changed everything, because what I saw that there gave me also what I was missing in corporate America. And that was connection and value in relationships. They don't have a lot, but what they do have is of highest value. They have an amazing connection, not only to themselves and their communities. As we know, the expression, it takes a village, right? but they
Mm-hmm.
also have an amazing connection to nature. And nature is such a foundation, to everything in life. And they see nature, animals, insects, or biodiversity or ecosystem as an extended family. And that was, for me, the most transformational thing to experience and see and observe. And how I wanted to bring that back to the United States kind of changed the trajectory of my life. Yeah.
Wow. So, how did you make the connection, and when did you make the connection between what you were observing about the community you were in and how some of those principles could be applied in the corporate space? Because that's not like an obvious, leap to make.
Yeah, well, I could just see how things were different. For example, I could see different how meetings were held, where meetings were always they were sitting in a circle. The chief in the village, and these are very small villages, but nevertheless, was always speaking last, making sure the community
Mm,
members were not only seen and heard, but valued for their contribution and their perspectives. Uh, Absolute opposite to what we see here in the United States, where usually the team lead speaks first, put out the agenda, what needs to be done, decisions need to be made, and what he or she, but most likely he, thinks is the best way forward. And then everybody, and then asking, is anybody opposed this idea? And of course, often everybody just agrees with what he or she just said. Very hard to voice your opinion or your perspective. And in there, it was welcomed and it was a part how their meetings were held. And I just thought, if this small little change would change everything, to bring in that diversity of thought into leadership is exactly what we need today more than ever. Because as we know, in organizations, things are extremely complex and we're moving in such a fast pace right now. We need everybody's input to make the best decisions. And we can no longer just rely on one person, that being the leader.
mhm,
And they should also feel a sense of relief that they actually no longer have, they don't need to be the smartest person in the room or pretend
mhm,
that they are. It's
mhm,
actually will be more welcomed if they open it up and ask for help and input and let everybody be the smartest in the room. Because we know that's the secret sauce, if you will, for
mhm,
the best decisions being made, having that diversity of thought
mhm.
and bringing that into
So
the
I'm
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious, to play devil's advocate, what if you're running an organization and you've only got so much time and decisions need to be made quickly. I can see
Mhm.
the argument that like, hey, we've got a loose plan. We're going to get some buy-in, then we're going to move forward. How do you interject and incorporate the opinions of others, and maybe at all levels, maybe not just leadership or multiple levels, without slowing things down dramatically?
Absolutely. That's a great, great point. And I agree with you. It comes down to some decisions you need to move fast, and some decision you can move slower. Uh, Ideally, the bigger decisions, the most serious decisions, should move slower. And when, because you know that you're going to save time in the long run, right? You put a little bit more time in up front, and it's going to pay off long term. So the key there is for the leader to have enough awareness and understand the decision and the consequences of some of these decisions and know what they can move a little bit faster on and where they need to bring in the diversity of thought. But absolutely. And it is a waiting game between the short term and the long term. And it always should be, and it always will be. And that's the beauty. And maybe that should really be what the leader should focus on, is knowing enough of what decisions need what kind of input. But always kind of weigh it to the long term, the more serious decisions really need to have a diversity of thought and voices heard, and not just selling himself on his own strategy forward. Yeah.
Um, so you've mentioned gender a little bit, talking about leaders who tend to be male and styles that tend to be male. I like to read a short passage from your book, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you say, I advocate for a paradigm shift in leadership, a shift that necessitates the blending of both feminine and masculine energies, advocating for a leadership style that is not only balanced, but also profoundly holistic. It is imperative that we extend our horizons to embrace and incorporate the rich tapestry of leadership wisdom that flourishes within non-Western cultures. The need of the hour is to transcend the myopic, profit-centric leadership models that dominate our current business landscape in favor of a perspective that is truly global and inclusive, one that values collective well-being over individual gain. Beautifully written, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, so talk about the importance of gender norms in your perspective on leadership, and given that, especially in today's era, many people see gender as something that's fluid or a social construct, or almost avoids characterizing things as feminine and masculine, but you embrace these terms here. So just kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, your question was about the feminine and the masculine, right? And
Right.
it feels a little bit black and white maybe in the book. Well, the key is we all have men and women and everything between, kind of, is we all have a range of the masculine and the feminine in all of us. And so I actually have a visual, and of course, well, you can't see the whiteboard back there, but this is how corporate America looks like right now. I don't know if you can see that. With the
A
masculine,
little
this is
bit.
peak performance, and you
Yeah.
have the masculine highly valued and incentivized and even celebrated. This is how performance looks like in most individuals and society, where there is a masculine, the feminine balance, because this is truly our human potential. It doesn't really matter where you at, as far as if you're a man or a woman or anything on the spectrum. It's just when you are open to have whatever you want to bring to the table valued, that's the key. It doesn't have to be here or here. It can also be right in the middle, right? Where I think most of us would end up. It's exhausting for women to try to be more like men. And if you read the book from the beginning, obviously that's how I kind of open up the book, where, I have this client who I'm coaching who asks me, Maria, can you help me become more of a man? I'm invisible
Oh,
here, and
okay.
and I think a
Yeah.
lot of women can sympathize with that. But we also have men who are basically have to give up all their feminine sides to be more of a man, right? Hyper masculine, because that is the culture that we have created in corporate America. And that is a culture that I don't think serves anyone except those really hyper masculine characters. And of course, is exactly what we're seeing playing out in nations, as well as national leaders, not just in the United States, but of course, in the United States as well. And I don't believe we win there. It's no win-win situation there. These type of leaders are hyper masculine and they're very egocentric, and I don't think they have our best interest in mind except their own. And I think you see that
Um,
echoed in leadership in corporations as well. Or they are in
Gotcha.
for the quarterly earnings, or when it comes to electives, the elective cycles, which, yeah, I understand that you do need to look out a little bit for yourself if you want to stay in power. But more importantly, you should think about the long-term consequences of your decisions being made under your term. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the balanced human mindset?
Yeah, so a balanced human mindset would be that you can have the complexity of being both daring and cautious, right? So you have that daring that we all have, and you have the cautious, and you know when to play what. And show up in the situation with whatever the situation is asking of you, or meeting people where they're at. So you have self-awareness and have developed the tools to have both. It would also be that you're aggressive, but you can also be timid. You are you're short-term focused, but you're also long-term focused. We need leaders that have both of the masculine and the feminine. And I'm not valuing one over the other. I'm just saying that we all need to bring the awareness to this and having a broader range, because the complexity of our challenges today are just so big and more complex that we ourselves need leaders that can carry both. Being adventurous and risk takers, yet responsible. I would like to see more responsibility. It just seems like we're so valuing as a society, especially in the Western world, these daring, adventurous, aggressive leaders. Really? Why are we going back to that? And if you read the book, I point out that there is an unconscious bias in this country in particular of who we find qualified and capable to lead. And it's not the person that is in service of all of us. And it saddens me because I think really good people are opting for leaders that truly do not have their best interest in mind. And I do think it goes back to survival. And so these same leaders, they need to provoke the fear in us to even be elected or to be growing into CEO positions, because fear is what they strive on. Because fear brings you and I back to, hundreds of years ago when we truly had barbarians at the gate and we had to protect the tribe. But the problem today is there are no barbarians at the gate. We have different kind of problems, and the barbarians at the gate is not the problem. Of course, they try to create that problem and showing toughness in that regard. But the reality is we're dealing with much more complex problems than barbarians at the gate in 2026. And it's the poly crisis with pollutants in our water, in our food. 7 million people died last year alone from air pollution. That is what's killing us, not barbarians at the gate. And I don't think people realizes this. And we really need to bring awareness to why we're going back to, desire to have these very alpha leaders, that are really not addressing our current challenges.
So do you sort of see it as your mission to help inspire some change? Because you're talking about both kind of at the micro level and the macro level. Like a small organization can incorporate some new things at their daily meetings to run more smoothly, but you're also talking about the world at large needing to make some significant changes in multiple countries. How do you feel as one person like you can most make a difference there?
Yeah, I think that's a great take on it. I mean, the reality is these leaders that are hyper aggressive and hyper masculine, and they don't seem to value much of the feminine, such as collaboration, cooperation, connection, relationship building. These leaders, they weren't, becoming leaders overnight. They grew up in cultures that valued and incentivized these type of behaviors. So if you think about it, it comes down to you and I actually changing what we value and who we bring forward. And I mean, this goes back to the sandbox and bullies and us being bullied around by certain characters and people. Why don't we collaborate and say they're not looking out for our best interest? They're looking out for their own interest. So it starts early. But I think specifically in this country, we tend to value that. And so that brings it back to more of the individual, the macro and the micro, right? And that also goes into organizations where we need to create a different kind of culture in an organization where these type of leaders cannot raise to the top, right? They cannot rise to the top because the culture doesn't allow for it to happen. So it does go back to that. And I can just speaking of culture, I can tell you coming from Sweden in 1995, of course, dating myself here, there were things where my outer story looks very American. I'm Caucasian, obviously white, blonde, blue-eyed, fit right in. But on my inside story is very different from the American story. So it was truly a culture shock. Just to give you a few examples, how aggressive I saw the American culture compared to the Swedish. Obviously not compared to any culture, but to my culture that I came from. Number one, the first thing I noticed was in schools here, you're supposed to admire and look up to and adore the football players. Well, what do football players, what do they represent? They represent masculinity, hypermasculinity, strength, alpha, right? And as a young woman, I was supposed to stand on the sidelines, which, by the way, is a sports masculine side term or term that we use also in business, to cheer them on, support them. That was my role. I wasn't allowed to play as a woman. My role was to stay on the sidelines. Then you're going to look at society. Who are the true heroes in this society, American society? It's the soldiers. The soldiers are glorified and highly valued. And of course, in the name, what you would call freedom. And of course, that could be a whole nother topic. What is freedom? And do you truly have freedom in this country compared to other countries on an individual level? And where I came from, it was not glorified because Sweden at the time had a mandatory requirement for men, young men, to service the country. So there was really no glorification or masculinity in it. It was just something you did if you're a young man growing up in Sweden. And then when I study international business, you start seeing the rules of CEOs and the leaders of this company and how many, and especially in corporate America, in the bigger companies, could make 200, 300 times more money than the average employee in the same company. And how we in my opinion, value these characters. And often, as we just talked about, they were masculine and hypermasculine in how they showed up. So you can see how this creates a culture where masculinity, in my opinion is highly overvalued over the feminine of connection, collaboration, relationships, and what truly brings meaning into life. And it's no surprise to me that a lot of people currently feel lost and don't feel connected, don't know what their meaning of their life is, because you are so into value stuff and money and status and power that you've forgotten that, we're all in this together. Let's connect to nature. Let's connect to animals. Let's connect to each other. And that is considered weak, even though we know in nature, nothing exists alone, right? Nothing survives alone. But that's what we're supposed to make believe. And of course, it's in the hands of these exact leaders that I just spoke about.
Well said. Yeah, it's survival of the fittest, I suppose, instead of focusing on collaboration and how we all get there together, wherever the there is, I suppose. Let's talk a little bit about the creation of the book. So at what point, as all these ideas are germinating, because I imagine you didn't just wake up one morning and say, have like a new philosophy on leadership. How did you get the idea to write a book? What was that, like the inciting incident?
I mean, I've seen the things we just talked about here. I've seen it in the schools. I've seen it in the society. I saw it in business, corporate America. But it wasn't until it actually hit my own family, ironically, back home in Sweden, that I finally felt like this is too much. It was the final straw. And it was when my own uncle basically manipulated himself to get the entire inheritance of my family and left my mother out in the cold. And it was only the two of them, even though my mother has been the caretaker for the most part of the family, including the uncle, so my uncle, and then their uncle as a wife. who had been disabled for over 10 years. And so I start seeing this pattern of women do all the caring and all the try to keep the family together and all the hard work of navigating the emotions and try to keep the family together. And the man, her own brother, took all the financial gains of the inheritance from their uncle. And it just broke my heart. It broke, first of all, it broke my mother's heart. How she was just, left without. And then it broke my heart. And I thought, this is just what we're seeing over and over and over again. And of course, we know that money equals power, power equals decision making. And we're caught in this endless cycle of men making the decisions for all of us. And we can see the consequences of those decisions right now, where we truly have a public crisis of pollutants everywhere. A child being born in the United States today with about 287 chemicals in their cord blood, day one. That is not based on good decision making from the top, whether it's business or nations. As I mentioned, 7 million people dying of air pollution every year. That's not good leadership. And I can go on and on and on with examples, and not just on nature, but on so many crises. And I would say it's a direct cause, obviously, of the decisions being made. And if women and the feminine had been equal, not only them, but an equal part in the decision making, a balanced well-being, if you will, a balanced mindset, I doubt we will be where we're at today at so many
And to
levels.
clarify, yeah, and to clarify, are you advocating more so that there's more women in positions of power and leadership, or that whoever is in these positions has just a more balanced mindset of bringing in both traditionally masculine, traditionally feminine characteristics?
Yeah, both. Absolutely both. Women need to get to the highest top of leaderships in the world. And of course, as you know, we're looking at absolute monopoly of men in leadership positions across the world, not only in business, but in nations and all world religions. But I also advocating for, of course, bringing out the masculine and the feminine in all of us, whether you're a man or a woman, and truly creating a culture that values and incentivizes both. Because that's not what I'm seeing here in the United States. Far from it, and it's very different from where I came from. And I would like to see that here. And as you probably know, Sweden is considered one of the most a lot of people call it the female utopia of the world. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say it's more of the human utopia of this world, where you can just show up the way you are. You don't have to be, super masculine or super feminine for that matter. And that's nice, and we don't have the same culture as you do here to over incentivize and value the masculine. And I think it creates, Sweden has been the most peaceful country in the world. We have kept our peace for over 200 years. Think about that.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's a small country. Anybody could have invaded it anytime.
True. So just getting back to the book for a minute, you decided to write this book after the experience with your uncle. And how long did it take? What were some of the challenges along the way? Because I can imagine initially, the excitement about it, getting started, and probably somewhere along the way, there was a point or multiple points where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to finish this. Is anyone going to read this? These types of questions.
Well, it's interesting because I think probably a lot of people that you'll find on your podcast, and maybe even yourself, was that you probably started from inspiration. And that's a good place to start. I did not start from inspiration. I started from pure rage. And
Okay. Well,
yeah.
yeah.
And so, it's a lot of fire in that. And if you can channel that rage into something, hopefully beautiful and a gift to the world, do it. The key is to channel it and channel it correctly. And I think, honestly, I managed to do that. I mean, it doesn't sound like it started from a good place, but I took that energy and created something good. And through the process, it was really a healing process in itself. It was a healing journey because I did find peace, you know. I don't hold on to this rage anymore. I'm very
Hmm.
passionate
Hmm.
about this subject, as you can tell.
Hmm.
And it's the thing I'm going to do to the end of my days. So I found absolute purpose in my life. But it doesn't come at this point, it doesn't come from a place of rage. It's come from a place I want, the desire to have impact and to make a change for the better for all of us, in particular women, young girls, indigenous population, minorities, LGBTQ, to have a voice and be included in that highest level of decision making in this world and in businesses and nations, because we need that diversity of thought more now than ever if we are to have a bright future. And we don't have that diversity of thought. We are run by the same mindset over and over again, a monopolized mindset by men and a very hyper masculine type of male in not just in nations as we see them playing out right now, but also in corporations and all the way to any organization, community. It's not just in the top. It's everywhere, if you ask me. And it comes back to the culture. Yeah.
Have you gotten a good response from the book so far, and anything that surprised you?
Yeah, and the biggest surprise is a lot of men love it.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're like, it's
I'd
so
love to know
nice.
why. What are they
They're
saying?
exhausted. What was that?
I would love to know what they're saying, like what the feedback
Yeah,
is.
and they're saying basically, I am exhausted of having to show up in this hyper masculine persona. I would be so
Mm,
relieved if I could just show up the way I am. And that's what you will see if you
that's
go to
fascinating.
Sweden. Yeah, isn't it? People
Yeah.
are just showing up. I remember my best friend when she went to Sweden for the first time. She's American from Ohio. And she's like, men are so feminine here. It's so feminine. And they seem so relaxed. And I'm like, yeah.
You're like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, exactly. They're just showing up the way they are. Just like probably a lot of women will be seen as very masculine, maybe even myself.
Hmm.
I'm just showing up the way I am. And and of course, different situation with different people, you just show up in different ways. But the reality is, how nice isn't that? Instead of pretending you're try to be something you're not. And so that goes for men as well.
Is there any thought of doing a follow-up book, or do you feel like you kind of said all you had to say?
Well, it took 4 years to write this book. And the biggest advice, by the way, that I have for people that are starting this process of writing a book
Yeah.
is because it is hard. And to your point, it will be days when you're like, wow, I need to find the energy to continue. The biggest advice I have is to put 7 minutes a day on your calendar to focus on your book. 7 minutes. And what that's going to create is hopefully a little bit more than 7 minutes. Maybe some days it will be 7 minutes, but some days it will be 14 minutes, and some days it will be 21 minutes. And, depending where you end up in your mindset and in your energy. But it's a good thing because at least it creates that momentum that you need
Hmm.
to not only start a book, but to complete a book.
Yeah. Um, so everyone who comes on making stuff, I ask them about basically what they would do if they weren't making stuff. So if you could never write a book again, if you couldn't make anything, what would you do career wise?
I would still speak about it. I would do podcasts. I would do public speaking. I would do leadership trainings. Anyone that is interested in this message, even though it wouldn't be written down. Well, and then you can obviously write articles and a little smaller or blogs or other things. A book is it's a big deal. It's extremely difficult, and then writing the book is just the first part. Then there is the publishing and the marketing. That is, in my opinion, maybe even more interesting to navigate. So there is that as
Hmm.
well. So just because you created and finished and even published a book, that's just half of the story, right? Um,
Right.
And now I'm actually entering my 5th year of focus on this book. So now it's more getting the message out, having impact, podcast, um, public speaking, trainings, that part. So you know, the good part is I love that. I really do like to talk to people. And as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about this. So this is to me the
Absolutely.
easier of the two. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you're still on this journey. It sounds like you will be for a while of this one
I hope
this
so.
one
It's
project, which
a
is exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, it's a very exciting journey to be on. It's truly a calling, and I'm really hoping to have a positive change and have some impact.
And where can people find more about you and find the book if they'd like to
Yeah, the
purchase
book
it?
is called "The Leadership We Need: A New Mindset for a Brighter Future," and I would love to connect with people on LinkedIn. They can also check out my website, Maria Brinck, with a CK, BRINCK, mariabrink.com, or go to my website, synergyinternational.com, and we can continue the conversation there. Yeah, this is how the book looks like. Should you see it on Amazon or any of your favorite online bookstores? And also, this is a continuum, right? Even if I may or may not get a second book out, there's always articles and other things that needs to be written. So if women and men have input that they'd like for me to consider, I'm very open to have a conversation and ideally bring even more ideas into these magazine. I've had the great honor to be featured in Forbes and Fast Company and also CEO magazine. So I'm hoping that's going to continue, and hopefully we can have this conversation and bring it in collaboratively together.
Yeah. And then of course you'll have to do the forward on the the second edition of the book, and you can include
There
all
you
your updates
go.
because it will keep
Exactly.
getting
You know how to.
every yeah.
Yeah, you got it.
That's it for this episode of Making Stuff. If you found this conversation engaging or inspiring, you can find more episodes and resources at makingstuffpodcast.com. There, you can also buy us a virtual coffee so we can keep the episodes coming. I want to thank our guest, Maria Brinck. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for
And
having
thank
me.
you. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time.